Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Danuski?
Here.
Councilmember Curtis?
Present.
Councilmember Marshall?
Present.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
Excused?
Mayor Baker?
Excused?
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
All right, will you all please rise and join me in the flag salute?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is agenda approval. Chair will entertain a motion to remove section B from the business, item B from the business agenda, 2017-18 biennial budget amendments. We will be looking at that next week.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'll second. All in favor of removing item B from the business agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? With that, the agenda is approved. We're now on to citizen comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you in the community. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Will the clerk please call up the first person?
Alana Croft?
Hi, I'm just here on behalf of HopeLink to thank you guys. Good evening, members of the council. My name's Alana Kraft, and I work at HopeLink as the case manager at the Kenmore Place Family Shelter, just a few blocks away. And I just wanted to thank you for your commitment to helping people who need a hand to make it each day, and by prioritizing the basic needs of some of Kenmore's most vulnerable residents. Thanks for your leadership to provide key human services funding in your community. And thank you for your partnership with HopeLink in providing a package of services to help people stabilize when in crisis and acquire the tools they need to be equipped to exit poverty. With your help, HopeLink served nearly 900 Kenmore residents last year. Please know your support makes a huge difference in the lives of people like Mary and her grandson. They were Kenmore residents who became homeless after a rent increase that she could not afford. With their belongings in storage, they moved into their car. She was referred to HopeLink's shelter program by a safe parking program nearby, 3 days before Christmas in 2017. She found warm accommodations, laundry facilities, food, and holiday gifts. She began to work on a goal plan with her case manager, applied for disability for her grandson, and accessed mental health and parenting services. She met with HopeLink's financial coach to begin to take steps to repair her credit and a plan for increasing her income. Mary met weekly with her case manager, worked on a monthly budget, and made a great deal of progress towards her self-identified goals. After several weeks in shelter, Mary was able to move to a permanent HopeLink site, where she continued receiving case management services and support for her grandson. Mary has expressed appreciation for all of the services she received from HopeLink. She never thought she would be in her situation and is grateful for the multifaceted services available to her. So thanks to our partnership with the City of Kenmore, we can support various needs with the goal of helping people achieve stability and take steps to exit poverty. Thank you very much.
Carl Michaelman?
Carl Michaelman, 18023 62nd Avenue Northeast here in Kenmore. Council, nice to see you all. I got to apologize ahead. I really wanted to stay for this meeting, but a friend of mine's from Spokane came in. His brother's in the hospital, so I have to leave after my public comment. So I'm here just to kind of talk about a little bit of the culture of municipalities. We're talking about tax increases, we're talking about the budgets, and at least I can say I'm getting educated in it, where the state is, putting these demands on us, and then we're going to be writing the checks. And so I'm not here to say, hey, we're getting a tax increase, and at least I'm understanding it. But what I don't understand, and I'm gonna say that this is the culture, and Kenmore's part of the culture, but last week when I was here, I found out about the employee benefits with health insurance. And I pretty much was I fell off my chair after I found out what the benefits are. And when I say it's a culture, it's not just Kenmore. People are telling me, well, the rest of the cities are doing this. My big concern for you folks is that, you know, we give 90% pay for the families, and then we go ahead and we give, you know, insurance to the employee as well. What happens here is that you guys give, we went from $0 deductible to $250 deductible. And then if you went into the hospital, you would pay $1,000, then it's 100% out-of-pocket pay. With the culture of what's happening with the Unaffordable Care Act, okay, that this is no longer can be you know, dealt with. If you folks are going to give benefits, at least give a reasonable deductible, reasonable out-of-pocket. And like I said, the problem we're running into, it's not just Kenmore. The arguments are, well, we're public sector, and we could get more money if we went out and worked for private industry. Well, I insert, go get a job in private industry. Because I think if you're going to go ahead and raise taxes, which I'm okay with, I think we all have to feel the pain. And I will say a couple people I won't name on the council, you know, are part of this culture because they work for the municipalities. And they'll probably totally say against that, you know, what I'm doing. But all I'm saying, if we're going to give these kind of benefits, at least let's be realistic and give $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 deductible, a co-insurance 80-20. I bet you that could save us a couple $100,000. I bet you. But the thing is, it's, again, I'm not focusing specifically
Mr.
to the city
Michaelman, we're at 3 minutes.
of Kenmore, but what I'm talking about is the culture of what all these municipalities do. With that being said, I thank you for your time, and hopefully you guys will listen. Thank you.
Kathy Caldwell.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Caldwell. My address is 15432 62nd Place Northeast in Kenmore. And I would just like to ask a question. And the question is, are we going to have to repay again for the improvements done on Rhododendron Park? Did someone answer that?
Citizen comment isn't really a back and forth discussion. Ms. Caldwell.
Okay, well, I'm just asking it because my grandson and grandchildren were going to come here tonight. We've talked at great length with David Baker and Al Van Ness about it. When the project was 1 week old, I took my grandson, who at the time was 4 or 3, but very, very, very precocious. We walked over to the area and he said, "Oh, Nana, what are those? What is that color in the river? It looks in the river, and it's all those bugs." And I said, "Oh, that's oil, Luke." And he said, "Well, it's so stinky over here." We talked at great length with David Baker and others about my concern of a brand new project, and it was obviously poorly built. Something happened. So my concern is if we're paying for it again, I find that really difficult. Having been a public school employee, there were years where we didn't go without a pay raise, and yet we were accountable for that student to show growth. My husband, who's been in private practice by himself, works 7 days a week, not 5. If a patient has something that is broken, he can't rebuild that. He has to fix it. And so my concern is that my taxpayer dollars may again be going to something that obviously wasn't done correctly the first time. And so, as a former public employee, my husband of 50 years has worked desperately hard. I just don't understand how the person who built this could not be held accountable, and that if that's reflected on our taxes again, shame on you.
Peter Lance.
My name is Peter Lance. I live at 6501 Northeast 151st in Kenmore. I wanted to talk briefly about the Lake Point project tonight, which I just learned may have been the Wyden project, at least at this point in time, may be terminated. However, going forward, this project and this property is not going to go away. It's going to be there, and this is perhaps a good time to consider the highest and best use of that property from the city's perspective. The last developer came forward, hat in hand, asking for subsidies and help, which was going to exceed the value of the property. The subsidy asked was about $50 million in round terms. The property itself is worth about $5 million if you look at the city's taxes, or the county's tax rolls. So the city has a legitimate seat at this table if you're going to subsidize this again, or consider a subsidy. And as you go forward, you might consider what the highest and best use of that property would be from the city's perspective. If you're going to be asked to kick in, what is the city's ideal of that property? And as you consider different proposals going forward, what is the highest and best use of that property for the current owner if you don't kick in anything? Where are they going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? 20 years from now, $1 billion project is going to be there a long time, the one that just evidently exited. But you're going to have a chance, or you may not have a chance to consider another one in this term of this council. But how do you want this thing to be at the end of the day? And what is the city's highest and best use? And if you don't kick in anything, what would the landowner likely end up applying to do? And if they need a little nudge from what they're likely to do with no incentive, how could you subtly incentivize them to make it what the city wants? And I would encourage you to consider a highest and best use of that property going forward, so that you're thinking about how you want this to look and being proactive instead of reactive the next time a developer comes. Thank you very much.
There's nobody else signed up.
Does anybody else wish to be heard? Okay, we're going to close citizen comment then, move on to the consent agenda. Well, first off, I want to say thank you to everybody who spoke. I'm hoping that, Mr. City Manager, could you or somebody reach out to Ms. Caldwell with her concerns and address those? Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
No, this isn't the proper place for that. But somebody from city staff will reach out to you, and you guys can have a conversation about that. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We're going to move on to first of three public hearings. Item A, allow construction and trade as a temporary use for 1 year at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way for an interim public workshop. Samantha Loic? Sorry. Associate Planner.
Yeah, Loyak.
Sorry.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present you with our public hearing. And as you know, the Public Works Department is no longer going to be utilizing Lake Forest Park services next year, and we need to find a temporary location for our Public Works shop. And as you've been made aware at previous council meetings, one of the first places that we're going to look at using is what we're calling the shell property on Bothell Way. And with that, with me tonight I have Jennifer Gordon from Public Works, so she's here to answer operational questions regarding the site, and Samantha Loyak is our planner.
If we could just pause just half a second. Kelly, I think all of our monitors up here are having an issue. It's flashing. We can't actually see what's on the screen. Is there anything we can do to address that, or should we all just turn our seats around? Okay. So while she restarts, we'll just take a quick break while she does that.
Anybody have any jokes?
Do you have a tight 3, Brian?
Pardon?
Do you have a tight 3 for stand-up? No?
No, no.
Right.
Sure.
You could just turn around too.
Really bad thing to movie theater right there.
Yeah, front row,
I'll hurt myself.
tall person in the middle, maybe not.
It'll just take a minute, then let's just do that. It'll be easier.
Brian has to stay up here for the next one.
And if you wanted to upload any other presentations that we'll have to, that'd be great.
Well, we have to come back up. Poor Kelly. Yeah, yeah, I know.
Adding to it. So if you, in about 30 seconds, want to refresh your screen, it should be there. No. Unfortunately, the audience can't see it, though. No.
And one was stuck up.
Okay.
You got something else? I'll start over.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything.
Fire in and see if that might make a difference.
Oh, yeah, I guess it has been.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, it's just caught.
And they can go ahead and start while I do that. See if it comes up on their screen.
Okay.
I got it.
Is it in the same,
It's on the agenda.
okay, there's not another?
Yeah, mine just popped up. So you gotta refresh.
Do they have it? I actually did already more than once, and
Yeah, I'm not getting it.
I didn't get it either. I even started all over my browser.
You just go on the internet.
That's where I was. Let's see, she put it down here?
Oh, here, yeah.
You said there was
Popped up for
another?
me. No, that's it right there. It popped up for me. But I just,
It says presentation underneath it?
Yeah, just on the wires.
yeah.
Um,
It says,
Oh.
Cuba.
Yeah, Yeah, okay, I don't get it.
So one thing you do is go to kenmorelaw.gov. Don't go to Civic Web. Go to kenmorelaw.gov.
I guess for this.
I'm not getting it to pop up. Are you guys doing the HTML or the PDF? Maria, because I'm hitting refresh, I'm not getting anything.
Click connect with city council, connect with council.
Let me get to it there. That's just
I'm
gonna
just
take
getting
me
the
to the
agenda
same
item.
Civic Web.
Can you just close that and get back in again?
Sure.
Yeah, but that's gonna, it's this.
Make sure you click on HTML on it, not PDF.
That's what I was trying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we put it up on the screen behind us? Those of us that can't see it can crane our necks.
Mixed bag on who can get to it.
Can I try something else again?
Uh-huh.
See, so I actually clicked on this.
Oh, interesting. I don't see why it would be different.
Yeah, it's still really glitchy on the monitors.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it's blinking, it's...
Didn't go through the.
All right, why don't we proceed with what we have, because this is what we have, so...
Okay. I'm Samantha Loyick with Development Services. This PowerPoint is actually really short, so I think we'll be okay. This is for the temporary use permit that we have before you to allow construction and trade for an interim public workshop at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way. And so I can explain pretty briefly just what the process is for temporary use and kind of what we're asking of you. And then we have Brian and Jennifer here also to answer any questions that you may have. So the property is a city-owned property, and it's on the corner there, 6532 Northeast Bothell Way. And it's currently zoned downtown commercial DC, and the public workshop is considered a construction and trade use in our zoning code, and that's a prohibited use in the DC zone. So to allow it on a temporary basis, we can issue a temporary use permit, and we did that administratively, but we're limited to 90 days for that temporary use that we issued. So that's going to expire at the end of the year. And so anything beyond that and up to a year requires council approval, and that's what we're asking today. And the next slide, which is the last one, shows you the layout at the property.
Any questions?
Member Smith?
Yes, can you tell me what's happening with the structure that's on the site there, that it says it's going to remain? Is that,
The espresso stand?
yes?
So the espresso stand and tenant is going to excuse me, remain at the current location throughout the end of the year. And at the beginning of next year, that business is going to close down, but the structure is going to stay on site. And the city purchased that structure, and we're going to utilize it as part of our shop area.
What did we pay for it, do you know? Or what's
I-
it under contract for?
$15,000.
Wow. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have actually another question. So if a suitable site is not found within the next year, and/or if one's found and we can't get the improvements constructed on it in a timely manner, does this just come back to us in a year for another approval, or what is the process on the use permit?
If the use continues on past the year that the temporary use permit is approved for, it will have to come back to council if it's for more than 90 days, as Samantha mentioned. We could issue a administrative temporary use permit up to 90 days, but anything over that would require council approval.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we open up the public hearing? Has anybody signed up for the public hearing? Does anybody wish to be heard on this topic? Anybody wish to be heard? All right. Make sure after your public comment that you go and sign in with the city clerk.
Steve Caldwell, 15432.
The MFT area to the TOD, and it would modify the level of affordability in that code. So this ordinance provides council the opportunity to change the level of affordability, if so chooses to. Currently with the MFTE, low or moderate income is equal to or less than 85%. Council needs to provide direction at the end of tonight with the action if you wish to change the level of affordability in the MFTE area. Since the adoption of, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on a couple of code requirements and code changes that we made over the time. And so, since the adoption of the TOD, the city, we haven't received any TOD applications. We're hearing from some developers currently building multifamily townhomes in the TOD area that parcels in the TOD are small, and they don't have the economic risks associated with assembling multiple parcels to build a TOD project outweigh the incentives. Developers are choosing to build their lower risk townhome options instead of assembling multiple projects or properties to build a TOD project. And so with our TOD ordinance, we have stuff on the screen here. Let me try to close this out. I don't know if I want to close that out. I'll move it. So our TOD is made up of approximately 75 properties, and it's in an area east of 73rd Avenue, all the way to the eastern city limits, north of 73rd Avenue. It consists of 6 different zones in that area, from urban corridor, downtown commercial, public, semi-public, R12, R18, and R24. A quick comparison between the underlying zoning code and the TOD densities would show that the underlying densities in those different zones are far less than what could be built in a TOD project. For example, a high-density R12 residential zone could build roughly 36 units per acre using an RDI, which is a residential density incentive, so it's another way to get increased densities, but we're not really seeing too many of that. We've had a couple projects use RDIs. With the TOD standards, you could get way more density. You have to have a minimum of 60 units per acre up to 150 maximum dwelling units per acre. And depending on how dense you go is how much affordability you would have to provide. So property owners choosing to develop under the TOD will have to provide affordable housing. For the TOD purposes, affordable housing is 10% of the units. The affordable housing has 3 different tiers of affordable: moderate, low, and very low income levels. The type of affordable required is based on how many total units exceed the base density in the underlying zoning code. So you go back to the base density in the R24s or the R18s and find out how many you're getting over that. And there's a tiered thing, and you have to look at it to see how many affordable units you'd have to provide. And so the 3 different tiers range from 35 to 70% for rentals and 50 to 80% for ownership. And those tiers, again, are moderate, low, and very low income. That's roughly the TOD densities and requirements, especially when it comes to the affordability. The MFT MFTE ordinance. In 2007, the city council established a MFTE ordinance, which is a tax abatement, is one economic development incentive that cities have successfully used to encourage multifamily development, including affordable housing in urban centers. The city's MFT ordinance was adopted in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 84114 of RCW, which authorizes this tax exemption. The MFTE ordinance allows the city council to designate one or more residential targeted areas. Ordinance number 07-0271 designated the parcels lying northwest of the intersection of 181st Street and 68th Avenue, also known as the Kenmore Village, as a residential targeted area. So these properties, as you guys are aware, have been mostly developed by the Main Street Property Group. So currently, the Kenmore Village parcels are the only designated residential targeted area in Kenmore. And here is a map of that area, which shows the different parcels. The red area denotes the urban center. And so the MFT ordinance also provides two exemption scenarios, an 8-year or a 12-year property tax exemption. The 8-year tax exemption does not require an additional affordable housing component. The 12-year exemption requires at least 25% of the total units to be affordable. The affordable housing requirements for the MFTE are very different than the affordable housing requirements of the TOD. For example, the TOD, 10% of the units exceeding the base density of the underlying zoning code are required to be affordable, and those are different tiers, as I explained earlier. The MFTE ordinance with the 12-year tax exemption equals 25% of the total units would be required to be affordable. So a project in the TOD receiving a 12-year tax exemption would need to satisfy the level of affordable requirements in the TOD before being bumped up into the MFTE difference. The original city ordinance number 07-0271 for the Kenmore Village project relating to MFTE originally defined moderate income household as household adjusted income is 80% of the King County median family income. In 2013, council revised the low or moderate level income from 80% to 85% of the King County income, and that was ordinance number 13 that was associated with the Main Street Property Group project. And as you may also recall, that same ordinance included specific language relating to the specific zoning requirements for the Kenmore Village project. The code originally had affordable housing set in the zoning code for affordable housing at 50% of the median income. We changed that to 85% of the median income. So there's been a little bit of confusion about what 85 and what 50% was changed recently. So in the MFTE ordinance, we changed it from 80% to 85%, and in the zoning code ordinance, we changed it to 50% to 85%. And so this ordinance, as it's written, if you choose to change the percentage of affordability, is going to change it in the MFTE area only, and there's no more specific zoning code requirements for any property in Kenmore. It was just that Kenmore Village property across the street, which is built out. So we analyzed property taxes over a 20-year period. We took a look at the residential units, including affordable units, for the 5 separate scenarios. One scenario was no development, continued use as it currently is being used today. Scenario 2 is a townhouse development without an MFTE tax exemption. A TOD development with an 8-year tax exemption. A TOD development with a 12-year tax exemption. And a TOD development without an MFTE. We reviewed each parcel in the TOD area, which, as I mentioned before, is about 75 parcels. And we looked at them on the probability of those being redeveloped in the near future. And so we didn't take into consideration if they had new development that was just recently built on the project up to 5 years ago or less, or if they had large multifamily existing buildings on the site. If the parcels were in the critical area, of course, we did not consider those. Large commercial businesses weren't considered, but that's not necessarily means that it's not a probable redevelopment of such business. And with that in mind, we kind of identified 18 different properties or groups of properties that could be redeveloped in the near future. And I have them on the map, and they range from everything from there's a group of single-family houses, and there's multifamily houses, and in one particular case, number 6 is 80th Court Northeast. It consists of multifamily houses, single-family, commercial, but it really kind of makes sense to group those together if you're going to look at a redevelopment. It has taken into consideration the park and rides, the St. Vincent de Paul property, and its park and ride, which its park and ride is currently being used by King County. And so even though we, St. Vincent de Paul owns that property, King County doesn't pay any property taxes on it. So we're not seeing any property taxes on 13 or 14 in either one of the park and ride sites right now. But if there was a TOD project, then after the exemption period would end, we would start to see that substantial increase in property taxes for those sites. Some assumptions that we used for this scenarios were we looked at the unit sizes and square footages based on the net present value of costs and sizes that we're really seeing today. We based it on a townhome of 2,000 square foot and a multifamily apartment of 1,000 square foot. It's kind of standard, and it's easy to do the math on that instead of looking at too many different scenarios. The land and the total improvement assessed value assumptions are based on the current King County Department of Assessments data. We had the assessed values increasing 3% a year over the 20-year analysis. And for the this analysis, the 18 projects we looked at as they'd all get their final certificate of occupancy at the end of 18, and the tax exemption would begin in 2019. So the exemption doesn't start until the January 1st after it gets the building certificate of occupancy. But actually during that time of construction, we'll receive property taxes both for multifamily, the land, and any kind of commercial component. And some of these properties that we analyzed in the TOD area, those 18 different properties, do have a commercial component requirement in the downtown commercial area. And so that commercial component was kind of looked at too in the analysis. And so we'll still be receiving property taxes for the land and also any kind of commercial component in it. At the end of the tax exemption period, all the improvement become taxable at the present value of the property as if it was a new construction at that time. And the residential density incentives were not used for this analysis. And as I mentioned, the RDIs, or residential density incentives, are another way to receive higher densities, bonus units, by providing additional affordability. For this analysis, it was just easy to do the middle of the road density that is allowed in the TOD, which is 90 dwelling units per acre. The code, as I mentioned, allows up 60 to 150 dwelling units per acre. And so with that information and that assumptions, plugged it into Excel and came up with these following tables. And so what this table here is showing that the property taxes over a 20-year period based on those 18 properties that we looked at. So it's not every property in the TOD, it's just those properties that we analyzed in the TOD, and those 5 different scenarios shows what the total taxes would be on that project. And that's for no development, continued use at its current rate, a townhome development with no tax exemption, a TOD development with an 8-year tax exemption, a TOD development with a 12-year tax exemption, and a TOD development with no tax exemption. So that far right column is if we got our TOD development with no tax exemption, and that's theoretically how much taxes these 18 different parcels would produce, roughly 243 million. But realistically, we're not going to see that. You know, we're probably going to see the orange, the townhome development with no tax exemption, the 85 million. But quite possibly, we could start to see more of the TOD developments with the 8-year tax exemption. After taking a look at this scenario, we kind of broke it down into a couple different agencies and to see what their portions of taxes they would be not receiving. And as you guys are more than probably aware, that the city's portion of the property tax is about 12.27 in Kenmore. The school district looks like 31%, and the fire district is 7%. So for this analysis, I really just stuck to those three agencies and to see what it would look like if they were to not get property taxes, or they would to get property taxes in that area. And so Kenmore's portion, because of that 12%, would shake out to look like something from $823,000 over 20 years just on the current use and no development, to something that could be more reasonably built, a TOD development with an 8-year tax exemption of $20 million. Of course, if you did do a 12-year tax exemption, you'd only be getting $14 million. And if you did no tax exemption and did receive a TOD product, you would roughly get around $30 million. Took a look at the one-time revenues that were associated to the projects, these 18 different projects. And what we're showing is that, you know, that the construction sales tax and the impact fees on a TOD project would be roughly about $26 million. And with those two combined, you know, you take the one-time revenues of the city and the property taxes that you could receive on a TOD project, and I think it could far outweigh, you know, the gives on that. Another thing that we looked at was dwelling units, and so, you know, the most important really part of the MFTE and the TOD is providing the denser dwelling units and the more dwelling units and also affordable units. And as you can see, as it currently sits out there, these are just the 18 properties that we looked at again. There's currently 56 dwelling units of them. Of those, 20 of them approximately are affordable. And with a townhome development project, there isn't, unless you're using an RDI, a residential density incentive, there isn't a requirement to do affordable units in a townhome development. And so if all of those properties were built, and the analysis took a look at each of the underlying zoning codes, it analyzed the size of the property and how many units could be built on it. It's shown that if we did the townhome development on all of those properties based on the underlying zoning, could only get about 500 dwelling units. But however, a TOD on those 18 properties that is basically in the middle range of the TOD development densities would produce substantially more. You know, you can get into well over 2,000 dwelling units. And the two different columns on the right are compared to an 8-year tax exemption and a 12-year tax exemption, because I mentioned earlier that if you go with the 12-year, then there's an additional affordable unit income. And so, the additional affordable unit requirement. And so that's about a 370 unit difference if it had a 25%, additional 15% theoretically more affordable units required. Here are the two other districts that we looked at, the North Shore School Districts and the fire district's portion of the taxes that could be generated from each different 5 scenarios. And so this information has been shared with both districts, and we've received input from them. But for example, the school district is currently, with no development, would be receiving $2 million over this 20-year period, whereas a development that was a TOD development with no tax exemption would be $76 million. But a realistic project that could be built might be a TOD development with a 8-year tax exemption, which would bring in about $51 million. The fire district's portion on those same 5 different scenarios is substantially different on all of them too. You know, currently, over the next 20 years, it'll only be receiving about $500,000 on those properties. But with any kind of development, could be substantially more. So after analyzing the 5 different scenarios, those 5 that we talked about, the no development, the townhome development, the 3 TOD scenarios, it's obvious that a TOD project would provide substantially more dwelling units, including affordable units, than no development or a townhome development. It's unlikely that additional incentives that a TOD product will produce. Oh, excuse me, it's highly unlikely without additional incentives that a TOD product will be produced. For these reasons, we recommend that the council expand the MFTE ordinance to the TOD area. With that, I am open for questions.
Do we want to do questions first, then public hearing, or? Okay, let's do the public hearing first. Do we have anybody signed up?
One person. Jenkins Chan.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jenkins Chan. I own the property at 17520 83rd Place Northeast, which is within the TOD. In May, my partners and I presented the development memo that's referenced in Brian's MFTE memo regarding that property specifically. We're currently approved to begin land development activities on a 10-unit townhome project, market rate 10-unit fee simple townhome project on that site. Over the past year, we've worked closely with your development staff in regards to the use of the TOD overlay code to potentially develop and build a 62-unit multifamily apartment building. It'd be 5 levels of residential with some parking underneath. We intentionally delayed the start of our townhome development for about 6 months here to evaluate the viability of a multifamily project. Despite investing substantial time and resources into that evaluation, we're not going to be able to proceed forward with the current TOD code because it does not make a multifamily project viable economically within the TOD. I also believe that it's been proven out by the fact that no single project has utilized the TOD since 2015. I think that's still an accurate understanding. And so no developers akin to us are incentivized to use the TOD code because no projects are economically viable. There's no question that the proposed MFTE amendment would encourage the use of the TOD code and may lead to economically viable multifamily construction. It's a very good start. We are very much in support of the amendment. But we also believe that it may not be quite enough for every property within the TOD. For example, in our evaluation, even assuming the implementation of an MFTE, our specific property was still only a borderline candidate as an underwritable multifamily project. We're real close to making it work, but ultimately in discussions with our financial partners and multiple lenders, it's not quite there. Depending on the site and property, other incentives may be needed, such as expedited review or different land use variances, height restrictions, setbacks, things like that to make specific sites work. Though we will be proceeding with townhomes on our subject property, we do look forward to working in the city of Kenmore. We've had a great experience so far, and specifically on other potential sites that we think could utilize an MFTE to get it over the hump to build multifamily units within Kenmore. So we look forward to working with you guys on that continuing thing. Thanks.
Does anybody else?
Nobody else signed up.
Anybody else wish to be heard? Anybody else wish to be heard? Anybody else wish to be heard? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing then. We'll go to questions. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Also, thanks, Mr. Chan. I remember when you and Eric came to speak before, and I love your letter because I actually think it outlines it really clearly what the difficulties are with the way it's structured. So thank you for coming tonight and also for the letter. I had a question for Brian. Brian, do you know of are there any parcel assemblages that you know of that developers have tried to pull together to make something work in the TOD?
Not that I know of.
None that you're, okay. And I also wanted to ask you, are the impact fees, are they the same for the MTFE units as they are for just regular market rate units?
The impact fees are the same for the MFTE units, except for the affordable units. The levels of the affordable units are credited.
Is it credited 100%, or do you know, or I'm just trying to get an idea.
I think it's 100%.
Oh, it is, okay. And in your calculations, to confirm, so for the percentage of the median income that you were basing it on, was that the 85%?
The percentage of the, say that again?
For the percentage on the MTFE units, was that based on an 85%
So
of
the
median income of the 25% that are affordable?
So the 85% of the median income didn't come into play in my calculation.
Okay.
So that, what that is saying is the property owner would have to look at the renter or the owner's, their level of income. And they couldn't, in this particular case, if it's 85%, they couldn't make more than 85% of the King County median income to qualify for that unit. And then once you get qualified, there's different levels of what you have to pay towards your rent or your mortgage on top of that.
So are you recommending keeping it at 85%?
No. No, no. I know that you guys have discussed it before, changing it.
Oh, I'm not necessarily, I actually wouldn't mind seeing it a little lower, but I also know, I mean, we learned with Main Street that there's a direct, dollars off the top once you, the lower you go, basically it diminishes the financial viability of it. And so I could see it going a little lower, but I know, so is that something we can decide later, or is that something you need to know tonight?
Either way, we could talk about tonight, and you can adopt something tonight, or we can bring that portion of it back if you want to bring us back or have us do a little bit more analysis on it.
Okay. I think it would be, sorry, I don't mean to keep rambling, but I do think it would be beneficial for the discussion to understand like what a typical market unit, how much a developer has to, how it impacts the viability. Because when you see how much it devalues the unit, then you can transfer that easily or a lot easier into understanding that at too low, it does diminish the whole point of what this ordinance is trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Curtis?
So first a comment, then a question. In general, I'm in favor of adding the MFTE to the TOT. Affordability, I sort of see as a combination of two things: quantity of housing and quality, and cost per unit. And clearly, large $600,000 plus townhouses does not add quantity or affordability. So I think this ordinance would move us to a direction where we have many more units. I guess I'm a little, so that's the comment. The question, so if we set the affordability at a stricter or lower level than 85%, would it directly affect the cost to developer and be less likely to get development? Because I would rather see lots of development at 85% than zero development if we choose 35% or some other number.
Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, I remember our conversations with Main Street on this back in 2013 or 14. And, we had them run the math and all that. And the number for them, it was to go from 85% AMI to 50% AMI was a cost of $50,000 per unit. That was the number they arrived at. But again, that was four or 5 years ago. And what does it roughly cost to develop an apartment unit nowadays? In the $200,000 range? Yeah, I'm kind of looking at you, sorry, sorry.
It does depend. We do kind of look at it per door versus like a square foot cost that a normal single-family home does. So it's a little bit different. One of our challenges specifically was because of the grade, and so we had some below-grade parking levels, which increases costs. But yeah, roughly, $150,000, $200,000 a unit, depending on the spec.
Yeah, so if it's costing you $150,000, $200,000 per unit, and then you add an additional cost of $50,000 on to bring it down to 50% AMI, that can make the difference, definitely make the difference between penciling and not penciling.
Yeah, can I maybe speak to that? So that, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's, that 50,000 is kind of the valuation of the unit over its lifetime. So,
Yeah.
and the understanding of the affordable cap, that is, it's not just for the 8 or the 12 year now, it becomes a permanent affordable unit, which is great. But so the lower you go, obviously the more impactful it gets as the valuation. So it exponentially increases or devalues that unit because of its permanent cap. So.
Okay, well then I've got a couple questions then. If nobody else, I'll come back to you in just a second.
Absolutely.
So a couple of questions here. Maybe I just missed something looking through there, but if you have the TOD and you have the MFT on the same area, are they additive to each other, or does the MFT's 25% affordable requirement kind of fulfill the TOD's requirements also?
It would fulfill the TOD. The TOD has a cap of 10% affordable.
So they don't stack on top of each other? It's
No,
just,
not a stack.
okay. And then the 8-year MFT, that's something that kind of goes project by project within an area that comes to council. We wouldn't just be laying that over the entire zone and just allowing that on any project, correct?
If you go to the 8-year MFTE, you'd be allowing over that entire zone, the TOD zone, for projects, for project-based, one project at a time.
But that's on a project-by-project basis?
Project by
Okay.
project
I just want to make sure we wouldn't just be making it.
So the current code, as it's written, it doesn't come back to council for approval? Is that what, were you asking anything about that?
Yeah.
You were.
Yeah, do the 8-year MFT proposals come to the council?
They don't. The code currently as written doesn't go to the council for approval.
Okay. Councilmember Marshall?
Do you have Mr. Sorry.
Sorry.
Mr. Hampson, did staff have a recommendation as to affordability?
I know that the council has been all over the board. I've even heard stuff from 30% for some places down, to 50% preferably. And we know that the 85% is probably about the average in Kenmore is, that's what we pay for. So even though it might be lower than the King County medium income, 85% is a little bit high. And so, in talking with Mike Stenger, who's also here from Arch, and they do have a project over in Kirkland that they're building at 50% AMI right now. And talking to Arthur too before he retired, stuff that's down below 50% isn't really penciling out for anybody unless there's some heavy subsidies with it, but those aren't anywhere to be found. But they are seeing stuff from 50 to 65% work.
Below 50%, you just said does not.
It's not penciling unless it has a lot of subsidies to go with it, and there aren't any right now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, thanks for those comments, because that was actually exactly what I was trying to get at, is that I know that there's been a lot of talk about the 30%, and clearly there's a need for it, but I do think the whole point is to encourage this to happen, and so I'd be more in favor of trying to keep it closer to the 50% adjusted median income. And I am in favor of the MTFE for the 12-year because it does encourage the affordable housing units. I don't know, the 8-year, not quite as excited about that. But did I hear you say that it will be then still a per parcel or per project 10-year or 12-year versus 8-year deal, that it's not going to cover the whole TOD?
That's correct. The ordinance as it's currently written has two different options. It's one 8-year and a 12-year option. And as it's written, it would just encompass all the TOD. And so it'd be a project by project based on whether or not it'd be an 8-year or a 12-year exemption. So there's a couple things we could do. One is we could table the 12-year part of it and the affordability portion of it and bring that back to you later, past the 8-year today, or whenever you want. And also, so that's one option. The second option is if you do pass it the way it's written, and there is an affordable level that you guys agree to on it today, my thought is you're probably going to see the 8-year projects and probably not too many of the 12-year projects with the additional affordable unit layer. But if you did have that affordable on there and somebody wanted to do it, at least it's there for them to take advantage of. So if it was at a 50% affordability in the 12-year period, they'll probably use the 8-year and do the affordable units that are required in the TOD, which are still substantial. I mean, those are really good affordable units. And keep in mind, this is just an incentive to get a TOD project. We're trying to get the TOD project. And so you don't even have to do a 12-year tax exemption if you didn't want to. But I'm looking at it more like, hey, let's lower the affordable income requirement. If a developer wants to come and try to do that 12-year, then at least it's available for them.
Yeah, thank you. And then the only other thing I'd add is that, you know, in your numbers, I think one of the things that would even help it more is if we can encourage at least some, if a larger project starts to pencil out, then it actually helps even boost the land value throughout the whole TOD. And so, you know, right now your assessed value is based on just basic appreciation assumptions. But if all of a sudden, you know, it becomes financially viable, then I think that it will help to encourage the development. And even with the improvements exempted, we'll still have a good benefit.
Councilmember Curtis.
So if we approve the MFTE and use the 85% affordability level, and in 5 years we got no development, then we'd have to come back and think about this again. Say somehow we still haven't offered enough incentives. If we start to see some development using some of these incentives, could we then later change from 85 to 50 or some lower level of affordability? I guess right now I want to see some development starting, and I don't want to really do anything to inhibit that.
So this is a state law, and so the state law sets the minimum level of affordability. So you can change it as long as it's not less than what state law requires. So there's an RCW that has a 85% maximum for different levels of affordability, and that's what we bumped it up to. So our code as it's currently written is meeting the state law, the maximums. And so you can change them anytime you want, the different levels of affordability throughout the year as many times as you want, as long as you're keeping it below that state law.
Thank you.
Councilmember Danuski.
Yeah, just my thoughts. I'm in favor of keeping the 8-year and the 12-year on the ordinance, and I do think 85% is too high, but exactly where to land, I'm not entirely sure yet.
I mean, I and just speaking for myself, I'm not sure I completely see the value in the 8-year, although it, as you were saying, that would kind of spur some of the TOD development, which would give us some affordable housing. And I frankly, we've had so many discussions about affordable housing. Right now, we're down 2 members, so I'm kind of wary about us moving forward and redefining what affordable is under the MFTE when I know at least one of the members who's missing. I think both of them, frankly, have strong opinions about what affordable is and isn't. So I'm a little hesitant to actually move forward tonight personally. And I want to take the temperature of the body to see if maybe we wanted, unless there's some really pressing need for us to do this now, if we could maybe look at tabling this or bringing it back in January and having the discussion with all of our members here. Is there anything pressing?
No, there's currently no projects or pressing needs to get this done tonight. So we're in no hurry. We can take a little bit of time to get through this. And so what we could do is analyze through Arch's help some different levels of affordability and what that could look like, and show those to you. and bring those back to the rest of the council and wrap it up then.
Does that sit well with everybody? If we just put this aside until beginning of next year?
No, I would agree because I know specifically the mayor has
Yeah.
pretty passionate feelings on it, and in all fairness, that makes sense. The other thought too is, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of things on the agenda, but the affordability component itself could also be a discussion at the retreat possibly, where we've got a little bit of information and we can just, talk a little more candidly about the pros and cons. Just
Have
to-
more kind of
that's all.
free-flowing back
You're
and
right,
forth.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if that sits well with everybody, then I'm going to put aside number D under the business agenda for now, with directions to staff to bring that back to us either maybe at the retreat or somewhere else in January. Is everybody okay with that? All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hampson. Now to the good stuff. Public hearing, 2019-2020 proposed biennial budget. Joanne Gregory, Finance and Administration Director. I can't see this stuff up here. Oh, geez. Oh. Yeah, I've got it. I've got it on my Surface.
Okay. Well, thank you, and good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members, and any community members who may be viewing this presentation. Tonight, we'll have a public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget, and considering the budget deliberations that have occurred throughout October and up to this time, we hope to resolve any remaining questions about the impact of any property tax levy and other proposals, and be able to bring back an ordinance next week for approval that incorporates your final directions. So these are the steps that we need to address tonight. I'll give my presentation. You can hold the public hearing, and then we can make some decisions either before or after the public hearing. And then also, I have I need some direction on salary and benefits at the end of the budget presentation itself. They're specific to salary and benefits. After tonight, where you're scheduling November 19th to adopt the 2019 tax levy, as well as the 2019-20 biennial budget. And then on November 26th, we are planning to adopt the 2017-18 budget amendments, which I will review with you next week. These are the policies that we have strived to adhere to in developing the proposed budget. So there have been a number of changes since the last biennium, the most significant change being the in-house public works staffing, work plans, and future site. Projections indicate, though, in our analysis that Kenmore's in-house operation will cost less than the contract arrangement with Lake Forest Park. And also the town square and hangar that are now open and operating have been incorporated into the general fund, all the associated revenues and expenditures, as well as the Kenmore Business Incubator operations. So there are two components to city operations. There's the operations themselves, operating revenues and expenditures, and then there are capital revenues and resources. So this presentation is sort of broken out by looking at some of the operations first and then an overview of the capital. The most significant, by far, source of revenue in the operations are the property taxes. And over the biennium, the budget for property taxes is $10,224,000. It represents 39% of our total budgeted revenue in the general fund. And as I said, the budget currently includes a 3% levy increase each year. And with that 3% levy increase, we would receive revenue from property tax over and above last year's levy of $145,000 for 2019. Basically, it breaks out into $48,000 for each 1% increase. So there was discussion last week about a levy increase of 1 or 3 or something in between. So I prepared a little schedule for 1%, 2%, and 3%. So we talked about what a 1% increase would be, and the way that you compute what the new levy is you take 1% over the prior year. So that's $48,376. You add new construction from the tax to the tax rolls, that adds another $41,662 to your levy. The city's 2019 assessed valuation is $4.8 billion. That includes a 13.3% increase from 2018, which is the biggest increase we've had in assessed value since 2015, and accounts for why the tax rate result is so low. So if you take the proposed tax levy divided by the assessed valuation, with a 1% levy increase, the tax rate becomes 1.2 cents, or $1.02 per thousand. And that's a decrease from last year, when the tax rate was $1.14. If you look at a 2% levy increase, the levy becomes $4,976,000. The only difference being you add another $48,000 to your levy. So same calculation and same assessed valuation, same process, and then the tax rate is projected to be $1.03 per $1,000 AV. You're going to see a pattern here. So if we look at a 3% levy increase, now we're at $5,024,000. We've added another $48,000 to the levy. Same new construction, same assessed value, same calculation, and the rate is $1.04 per $1,000. You know, this extra $98,000 is really, I think, significant to the city budget. And when you think in terms of the impact on the community, I know most of us think about what's the impact on the home, my home, your home, but it's also shared by all the commercial properties in the city too. So in a lot of cases, the burden of that tax increase is not going to be borne by the small homeowner. All the commercial properties and all will share in that tax increase. This slide, and I'll step through it really slowly, tries to show the impact of what those different levy increases are on what could be a typical home in the city of Kenmore. We used a $600,000 home for this example. So if in 2018 your home was assessed at $600,000 and you were taxed at last year's rate, that tax would be $684. If you assume that there's no change in the value of your home going into 2019, you can see that in all three scenarios you would likely pay less Kenmore tax than you did last year due to the drop in the rate. That's probably not likely to happen. So if, let's say your property increased 5% from last year, again, you still are likely to pay less than you did last year. And at about 12, you can see that that's sort of the tipping point. The assessed valuation across the city averaged about 12% overall. So if your valuation is increasing faster than what the citywide rate is, you're likely to pay a little bit more. If your property is increasing at a slower rate than the city, you're likely to pay a little less. And I wanted to answer the question, how much does your property have to increase in value before your 2019 tax becomes greater than your 2018 tax? And assuming a 3% levy increase on a $600,000 home, that appreciation would have to be about 9%. So I hope that that helps put it in perspective for you. This chart shows the distribution of taxes on a $600,000 property for 2018. You can see that the city's share is about 10% of that total pie. There are 12 taxing districts in all affecting a city of Kenmore residents' property tax bill. And we use 2018 because we don't know what the other taxing districts are anticipating for 2019. But on a $600,000 property, the tax bill would be about $7,024 with only $684 coming to the city. King County reported that almost 50% of this total tax obligation is voter-approved taxes. So this is not necessarily the regular levies that all these entities are approving, but many of them are also voted by the community. This next chart is just an illustration of how the increase in assessed value and then the decrease in assessed value during the recession and the resulting recovery affects the tax rate. So as assessed valuation climbs, the rate drops. As values fall, the rate rises a little bit, and then as the recovery came into play, the rate has dropped again to maintain a fairly level levy over time. And for 2019, the levy rate is as low as it has ever been in the history of the city. And this bottom chart shows since 2002 what the new construction added to the tax rolls has been. And you can see that 2018 was the peak for us, but in 2019 it's dropped off considerably. When we look at the general fund, you can see that, again, property taxes, and that's a really odd-looking pie. It's not round like it is on my screen. Property tax is 39% of that total revenue picture, so it is very significant to our operating budget. Sales taxes are also very significant. That's the second largest revenue source that we have, and utility tax and make up the third. This chart is just an illustration of how assessed valuation has changed over time and in compared to the levy, which has been a relatively flat increase compared to the steeper increase from assessed valuation. Sales tax, the second most significant revenue source to the general fund, has shown some moderate and slow growth. We are budgeting $4,450,000 for the next biennium, which is a conservative number. You know, right now everybody's talking about, the internet sales and what's that going to do for our bottom line. And we'll continue to watch that, and if these projections are too conservative, we'll take that into account and let you know. But so far, we haven't seen any particular impact from that, except from Amazon. Utility taxes, these are the three categories of utility tax, and here it's really clear to see how the telephone and cell phone utility tax has declined. Gas and electric, moderate, slow growth. I don't know why they took a dip in 2015 and 16. It may have been weather-related, less usage, but they grow slowly over time, but nothing dramatic.
I did find that interesting. If you look there, we're losing almost, or the reduction in telephone and cell phone has gone down by $200,000 a year almost.
The street maintenance fund has only one dedicated revenue source, and that's fuel tax. But on this chart, I've tried to show the other funds that we put into street maintenance. Because the fuel tax is per capita based, and it grows slowly over time, but nothing dramatic either. So the city has dedicated the water and sewer franchise fees to the street fund for maintenance. Those are shown by the red line, and that revenue grows fairly steadily, generally 3 to 5%. It's not a per capita based distribution, but I think it is impacted by population growth, because as more people, as the residential number grows, more people need water and sewer. And then the transportation benefit district fees have generally been dedicated to street maintenance too, and those kind of bounce around a little bit, but generally grow between 1.5% to 4% a year. Other than those major revenues that I just reviewed, these are the other important sources of revenues for the operating funds. And in doing an analysis of general fund revenues compared to our neighboring cities, Kenmore appears to have the lowest per capita revenue. The only adjustment that I made in doing this analysis on both the revenue side and the expenditure side was to try to take out the impact of those cities who have their own fire, EMS, and inspection services. So I reduced both the revenue side and the expenditure side in those cities. But the different bars will show you kind of where the differences are from city to city. Specifically, it's easy to see when you look at Woodinville's orange sales tax bar compared to Kenmore's orange sales tax bar. So in the neighborhood, Kenmore appears to be the lowest. Moving to the expenditures, I thought it would be interesting to point out that these 7 categories are the single most significant expenses in the proposed budget, and they make up 70% of the total operating funds for the general and the street fund in the budget.
Just a reminder, this is over 2 years, correct?
Everything is 2 years, correct. And in those expenses, we do have some new full-time equivalent positions that are up for acceptance, if you will. 6 of those are funded by the general, street, and surface water funds, and those are the maintenance workers and the administrative assistant, all connected to the new public works operation. And then a half-time FTE recreation coordinator funded by the general fund. Also included is a limited-term capital projects manager that would be funded by the general fund, but primarily through transportation capital, because we anticipate this project manager to be reimbursable to the general fund for most of their cost. And then the surface water management fund includes 1 FTE for a surface water technician. A similar analysis was done on the general fund expenditures, and this graph, based on that same analysis, comparing Kenmore to our neighbors, shows that Kenmore appears to have the lowest per capita expenses of other cities in our area. Then I wanted to take a look at capital project costs in the 1920 budget, and you can see that in our capital expenditures, 84% of those capital dollars are scheduled to be spent on transportation projects, which include the 2 walkways and waterways projects, as well as the West Sammamish Bridge. All very significant projects, so no surprise there. And then the resources that fund those projects come from these sources, and I thought this was interesting in that both between federal grants and state and local grants, that's 57% of the resources for all those capital projects, which I think is just really a great fact to know. Very little city funds. There's some, the bonds are here. Other debt, which would be the Public Works Shop and the Public Works Trust Fund loan. But primarily, we are funding more than half of our projects with grants. So there are 10 park projects included in the 2019-2020 budget for a total of $3,859,000. There are 9 transportation projects that make up that 84% that you just saw a moment ago for a total of $45 million. And currently there are 7 surface water projects. The biggest one, of course, being the culvert, which will be started soon, funded by the Public Works Trust Fund loan. And these total $2.7 million. And I would just like to point out that with the potential adoption of new surface water rates, this list could be amended in 2019 or 2020 if additional funds become available. And last but not least, we have a public workshop identified in the capital projects section with some expenses anticipated for finding and securing a site sometime over the next 2 years. So this is a recap or an overview of all of the city budgeted funds. And I need to point out that this is the same schedule as on page 70 of the budget, and it contained an error because it didn't show any expenditures for the Surface Water Capital Fund, which of course there are, and I have fixed that on this screenshot.
Can you go back to slide 29?
Yes.
Just a reminder, this is a portion of the budget. The total budget is $6.5 million over a 6-year period. So the $2 million you see there is mainly for land acquisition. We don't plan on construction or anything until after this coming biennium.
Right. We had $6.5 million in the 6-year capital view, but only $2 million in the 2019-2020 years, which is what goes into the current budget. And then I should point out that, so these budgets do not include these items. And these are the city council directed changes that have been discussed over the last several weeks. So I've listed them here for you, summed them up. The expectation I came away with was that any net surplus would be programmed for the street fund and road preservation. And as that currently stands, that's $429,000. But this, so these items were agreeable to the council. The only thing this doesn't include is the impact of a levy that's different than 3%. So with that concludes my presentation on the proposed biennial budget. I'm happy to take questions or comments now or after the public hearing.
Yeah, let's do the public hearing first, and then we can have our conversation. Is anybody signed up for the public hearing?
Yes. Stan Eisenhuth.
Greetings. My name is Stan Eisenhuth. I live at 16328 Inglewood Road Northeast in Kenmore. Forever. Thanks for hearing me tonight. You guys are doing a great job. I don't see you too often, but I see the results. The purpose of my coming tonight really was to just gather some input that I've had from clients and colleagues and neighbors and so forth about the city, about the area. As a realtor with the region's largest agency, we see a lot more than many people. So Kenmore comes up often, and I guess it's a good topic. It's been discovered. So I'm going to run a few questions by. I just have 3 questions. And this has to do with, as you're getting ready to go through the budget, good timing, these might be interesting. So to start, it says, so many clients, neighbors, and colleagues have asked about business development in the Bothell-Kenmore areas. As a resident, not to mention my years growing up in Lake Forest Park, my experience with Kenmore has spanned over 41 years. Since incorporation, we've all seen much change in the business climate. But it remains unclear how the business community itself impacts the city's bottom line. That's from the street looking back. So in summary, I've heard a lot and seen, and here are 3 questions for you. So as things level out from a 4-year high, the market, and again, this is coming from a realtor's perspective, how many businesses do we now have in the city? And what's the net gain or loss of the number of those businesses in this last 4 years? And what's the economic impact of this? Is it good or bad, or is it better? Could it do better? That's number one. Number two, what type of businesses would our residents eagerly support going forward? How would we know that? And by the way, I've got handouts. By type, do we know their priority? And which would most improve the city's revenues? It's timely. Third one is taxes, bottom line on taxes. How many taxes were added over this period and what's going? I think we've answered some good stuff tonight. How many new single-family apartments, condos, units were built in the last 4 years? And I have some other things I could add if I had time. We'll see on that. And then finally, from the cost of paying house taxes, and this comes to, I'll use single-family residences. We actually pay more for house taxes than the 6 surrounding areas. Now, that's based on, and I've got all of the data, and it's on Excel as well. That's based on taking the last 3 to 6 months of home sales, 600,000 to $1 million, in the Kenmore and the 5 areas around us. And so there's anywhere from 20 to 40 homes. I took a cross-section of those homes, single family, not townhomes and not apartments. And then looked at the deviation between what somebody pays $800,000 for a house in Kenmore, and their taxes X. And if you go through a number of those, 25 or 30, there seems to be a pretty consistent ratio. Same exercise for Lake Forest Park and the other cities. So we do come out higher. We do come out higher, and that's on the chart. So the city wants more revenue, and I agree. I think we do. But before imposing more new taxes, and this may be a little late in the game for this budget, but I'm just looking into the future with you. Would you summarize for us what measures are to curb spending or reduce costs have been affecting, and which more can we do better on? And would the decision to increase the budget be better served by first getting answers to these points in the future? I look forward. I speak for many who want the best for our city. However, we submit that we may be best served by looking inwards before we look out. And I've got another minute here to go. A couple points. Looking at the construction and the building discussion that occurred earlier, something that may be of interest. So in appraisals, 2017, 2018, as we all know, prices went up considerably in housing. And so 11%, and again 16%, depending on what area we're talking about, but generally in this area. It all went up. The last 2 years was different. It went up in the first half and flattened out in the second half. Again, 2018, it went up and came back down. It flattened out. It didn't flatten out. It actually went down. So as of right now, we are down in this area from 860 median closed sales to 840. We're down to 760 since February. So just to take that into account, we can be of help going forward with that. That's my point. Hope it helps. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Steve Caldwell. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much.
Steve Caldwell, 15432 62nd Place Northeast, Kenmore, and my business is 6509 Northeast 181st Street in Kenmore. I want to thank you all for your service, and it looks like you got a bunch of big projects coming up, and I know what it's like to be there. But I want you to reconsider the 3% tax. I went home after the meeting last time and checked my property tax value went up 12% for last year, and it'll go up probably another 12% again. And then a 3% and a 3% is getting up there. And we heard from the lady from HomeLink who had a client there who couldn't afford to live here anymore. And that's where we're headed if this continues with the tax rates that you guys are looking at. And I also feel if you raise the tax on businesses, they're going to pass that on to our residents. If you're renting here, which I am, my rent will go up. If you're selling a product, you're selling food, and your rent goes up, it goes on to the customer. So it snowballs. It's not just our homes, it's also the community and everything else. And the traffic still hasn't gotten better. That's always been an issue, and it's getting worse every day. I see it every day when I come down to my office in the morning. And then my mother's at Evergreen Hospital, and coming back on 100th, it's impossible. So that thing has to be addressed. So when it comes down to this vote that's coming up, Councilmember Marshall and Councilmember Shrebnick, I think it's up to you guys. I tested the tea leaves, and it's you're the ones that it's going to come down to have to make this call. So good luck. The other thought I had was I just went to a ribbon cutting today of Dr. Lee, and unfortunately there weren't any council members there. So I kind of covered for you a little bit, but it would have been nice if you would have been there since it's a new business that's gone into business here today. And the vacancies of businesses right now is, I went and counted again, and we're now counting the Coffee Hut now going out of business. That's going to be 12 empty businesses in Kenmore. And, you know, that it goes from T.O.'s to the Jiffy Lube to the bank across from the hangar is out. And your two buildings that are behind the Seaplane restaurant, they're still empty. Dr. Minahan's office is still empty. So we got some work to do, and good luck. Thank you very much for your service.
Nobody else has signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? All right, I'm going to close public comment, the public hearing then, and just open up to questions. Anybody have any questions, comments? Don't all raise your hands at once.
Your Honor, so
Yeah.
we are asking you to give us some direction that we can bring back to you for next week for hopefully budget approval. The direction we're looking for, and Joanne, feel free to add to what I'm about to say, is give us direction on the property tax. Also, we think we got your direction on those budget cuts that Joanne summarized on slide 31. I guess cuts and additions. So we think that's your direction, but just want to confirm that. So property tax, slide 31, any other direction we need from council?
Councilmember Smith.
I have a
Yes.
question about, were we going to discuss the VIBA contribution anymore?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's the
Because
other
I didn't see
direction that
on
we
here.
need. So I've just made that kind of separate from this particular budget presentation, but I can go into that now and present to you what I have, and you can include that in the whole deliberation?
Yeah, sure. Let's have that conversation.
Okay. So first of all, this is the proposed update to the salary plan. Pay ranges have been adjusted by 3.6%, which was the CPIW as of June, and that is the recommendation we're bringing to you. The CPIW is the index that we typically use for wage adjustments, and so the pay ranges would be adjusted accordingly and awarded to employees on January 1st, 2019. Just to note that there are at least 8 staff positions that are at the top of their pay range. They will no longer be eligible for a merit increase during 2019, so this cost of living increase would be the only increase that they would see. In addition, we adjusted several positions in the salary plan due to market data and the salary study that we did, as well as some internal organizational changes. These wages and benefits have been included in the 2019-2020 proposed budget. On this next slide, we're requesting council approval to continue the HRA VIBA contributions that were first offered to employees in 2018 when we transitioned to the Health First 250 plan.
And these are annual numbers, correct?
These are annual numbers, and they are $450 for single employees, $900 for employees plus one dependent, and $1,350 for employees with 2 or more dependents. We also have a high deductible health plan available to employees, and council has, for the last 4 years, made contributions to a health savings account for that purpose, because the high deductible health plans do come with a significantly reduced premiums. So even with a contribution as listed here, $2,000 for an employee up to $4,500 for a full family, the city still recognizes changes in those premiums without any additional impact to the bottom line. And so we would request that the city continue to fund at these levels. And then the last thing I wanted to bring to your attention and get some feedback on, and perhaps a direction, is a new health plan option called an Affordable Health Network. So the AWC Trust is adding these new health networks to their lineup of employee health benefits, so that an employee could choose to be part of a network, one of these four: an Eastside Health Network, Everett Clinic Network, MultiCare, or UW Medicine. These networks are designed to improve quality and efficiency and patient experience while reducing the overall cost of patient care through management collaboration. So they are priced at 5% lower than the main health plan that we currently offer. Other features that they use that is a benefit to the employees is that the potential out-of-pocket costs are lower, but the deductibles and most of the other costs sharing is the same as the Health First 250. So we were proposing that if the city is saving 5% on all these premiums, that they consider splitting that savings with the employees as an incentive to try out these health networks. And if the city chose to do that, then we would contribute that savings to the employees' HRA VEBA. But we do want to offer these no matter what, because we think this is a really interesting avenue in the health industry of this managed care and these contained networks that sort of operate like Kaiser, which is another one of our options. And it is another attempt to hold costs down in the long run. So those are the benefits that I am presenting to you for your review and discussion and approval. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Danuski?
Do we want to go through these one subject at a time and make a decision, or kind of piecemeal it and kind of all over the place?
That's a good question. Why don't we go through in the order that you presented them, and we can go through that
Okay.
way.
Do you want to start with the salary plan? Because that would come as an attachment to the budget ordinance. It's traditionally the way we've done it, that we would adopt the budget ordinance and the salary plan as one ordinance.
I think that's fine. Any objections? Okay.
Okay. Any questions or comments about that? Okay.
Councilor Smith?
Well, I was bothered by the fact that we're increasing a salary range 4% on a position that we just hired that had nearly 100 applicants. And I just don't understand why we do that. And so, there's no good time or place to talk about these things except when you've got it right here in front of you. And so, to me, it really bothers me that somebody accepted a job knowing what a salary range is, and then we don't even get through a year, and it's getting a requested 4% bump. So,
Sorry, which one are you, I'm craning my neck looking at this. Which one are you referring to?
I'm referring to, there's a couple that the city manager had recommended be increased, and
Yeah, it was volunteer and events coordinator and
The
communications
communications specialist.
specialist. So, roughly, where are those? I can't see them in this.
I actually
Oh.
can't even see them
Oh,
from
right there.
here,
There's
but
There's the
communications
I just
communications
remember them.
specialist and The vol-
Volunteer and events coordinator.
Volunteer and events
So
supervisor
they're
is
both
right there.
9%, give or take.
Yeah.
These were two positions that, when we did our salary study, fell way below the market, or the market showed we were way below the market in what we were paying as a range. So in keeping with the reason for doing the salary study, we felt that these two positions should be brought up to the market data, whereas most of the other, in fact, all of the other positions were within 5% of what the market median was. But those were much lower than that.
Yeah, and so I understand that, and I appreciate that, and that's, I understand when you say it's the point of the market study, but I look at it and I go, well, what better market study is there than actually posting a position and seeing if it gets filled? And so that's the part, that's the part that I don't, it just doesn't make sense. So, anyway.
Do you have I mean,
So, well, I would say you haven't even got through a year, and it's like
is your mic on? Sorry. Is your mic on?
Oh, thank you. If somebody's going to accept a position, it just seems logical that, you've got meetings of the minds, and you've come together to accept something, and I don't see, regardless of what a study says, when you had 100 applicants for it, for both of them, it was really close to 100. One was just over 100, and one was just under. I don't look at that, and the first thing that jumps out at me isn't we're under the market.
I guess my question is, do you have a motion? Do you have a
Well,
proposed way that
I
you
would-
want to try to
well,
address this?
I don't know if anybody else, maybe nobody else sees that as a problem, because if they don't, then there's no point in even making a motion. I would like to know if anybody, else sees that as an issue, or is bothered by just the sheer logic or illogic of it.
Councilor Curtis?
I'd be willing to comment, and then we have a comment at the other end of the table, too. I agree. At least for the first year, people have signed up, they've agreed to that salary, so I wouldn't increase it for the 1 year at any rate.
City Manager.
Question for the finance director. So regardless of whether this gets the 3.6 or the 9%, will this affect their actual pay that they're going to be getting for the next biennium?
No. No.
So-
It doesn't change their pay. It just expands their earning range.
So we purposely decouple the range from the actual salary. I always go like this. I do this every 2 years. I go like this. So if this is the range and this is their salary, if the range goes up, the salary doesn't go up with the range. And so what we're trying to do is keep the market, or keep the range current with the market. You could hold it lower, but in 2 years, when we do the salary survey again, it'll just be probably just that much lower. It'll need that much more of a jump to get current again with the market.
I understand, and I guess maybe the bigger question is, then it just makes me question how reliable is the study that we're comparing when we have something like this happen on positions we just filled? Because it does, it diminishes, to me, it diminishes the credibility of it.
Right, so when we did the, I can't remember on volunteer and events supervisor, but when we did recreation coordinator, we did our own quick study. We didn't rely on the consulting firm, and we erred on the low side in doing our quick study. Nancy might be able to correct me on this, but I don't think we contacted all 10 cities and did a full study. We just did a more abbreviated study for that position.
And we haven't actually established anything formal for the rec coordinator yet. In fact, it's not on this schedule.
So just to clarify, the people in these two positions, they will still fall, even if we increase the range 9% or 3.6%, they're still going to fall within the range, but their salary will only go up by the COLA and any merit increases?
Yes.
Given by their managers, okay.
So this decision tonight, either way, should not directly affect their salary during the biennium.
Councilmember Curtis?
I'll just comment that I'm not sure I totally understood that. So thanks you for that clarification.
Yeah, I don't think I understood that until tonight also. I thought we were going to be asked to give some people some fairly significant raises when that's not actually what we're doing.
So my recommendation is to keep it current with the market. I do think that the Cabot Dow study was more reliable than what we did. And I think if we do it now versus as opposed to 2 years from now, it'll be more incremental than having to take a bigger jump to bring it up to market in 2 years.
So I guess my question is there, okay. So if there's no objections, we'll, Councilmember Marshall.
I'm not adverse to Councilmember Smith's general gist.
Okay, well, then I would make a motion that we don't adjust the range.
You want to keep them at the 3.6 that everybody else is getting?
For the 2 positions that were being boosted, another 4%.
So you mean not to, I just want to clarify, you don't mean not adjust them at all, but you mean keep them at the same 3.6%?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I want to be clear in this motion what 2 positions you're talking about. The communications specialist.
I'm having a hard time seeing it from here.
Okay.
But it's the 2
Volunteer
city
events
managers.
supervisor.
Volunteer events and communications specialist.
Right.
Sorry, did we get a second?
Second.
Okay. We got a motion, a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Curtis?
I just, now that I understand it better, I'm inclined to just stick with the staff recommendation.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? No? Motion fails. All right, what was the next?
The next item is the contribution to the employees' HRA VIBA. And this is an annual contribution that was made in 2018 in response to the higher deductibles and the higher out-of-pocket costs that employees would possibly experience when we moved from the Health First to the Health First 250 plan. So I was looking for approval to continue to make these contributions in the next biennium.
Councilmember Smith?
I would move that we make 50% of each of those next year, and then the following year, we eliminate them completely.
We have a motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Curtis?
So over the years, I've been in a variety of different places, and costs do go up, and things are shifted to employees. Sorry. Time for medicine, apparently. I thought I turned that to silent. Sorry. And even though I don't like it as a patient, as a person who has to bear those expenses, that's the reality of most businesses, private, and I believe the municipalities is gradually coming into that realm as well. So I think it's reasonable to, basically we're protecting people to a level of coverage financially that used to be, that will never be again. Just more and more of the expenses are being shifted to the employees in organizations. So that's why I favor the ordinance, or the proposal.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yeah, I don't support this proposal mainly because we did do a study on all the health plans, and even with these contributions, we're still saving from what we were doing before. So that's just my thought.
Councilor Smith?
But I think an important part is that we also found out that this is not typical of other municipalities. And so, I want our organization to keep finding efficiencies and cheaper ways of doing things. And I just would say that, that's what any company or organization should do. And sometimes there are ways that make sense to share it, and other times there aren't. And this is one that even through, the finance director's own study, it came out that we were an anomaly offering this as a city. And I think it helps support the reason we shouldn't be doing it, especially at a time when we're asking for tax increases.
I'm just going to say a few words and I'll get to you because you already spoken, Councilmember Curtis. Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Danuski. Last week we made quite a swath of cuts, and many of those were bringing things in-house and putting more work on our workers' plates. And part of what, and I know that we had somebody during public comment kind of deride this way of thinking, but I think it is true on some level. The agreement when you work in government is your pay might be lower, but your benefits are a little bit better. This is a fairly insignificant part of our budget in the grand scheme of things. It's $28,000, give or take.
Correct.
But we have seen how when our employees look to the private sector, they are able to, many of them are able to get very lucrative jobs. And part of how we compete with those jobs, we can't compete on salary, but we can compete with these little things that make the quality of life just a little bit better, and for our employees. Because I'm all for looking for efficiencies. I'm all for looking at cuts, but not really when it comes to our employees, who are our most valuable resource. I think investing in them and trying to keep them happy pays off for us in the long term in a much bigger way than small savings here or there. The cost of recruiting for a new position and filling a position, even one position, is probably 2 or 3 times higher than what we would save with this cut. Not that I'm saying this cut is going to result in somebody deciding to leave, but it is a cumulative effect of little things like that could make somebody decide to start hitting the job boards a little bit harder. So I'm not in favor of this motion. Councilmember Curtis.
So I'm having a hard time opening that particular file. Can you show that, the comparison study that we did with similar cities and those still offering?
You need a copy?
Yes, please. Thank you. So, as I looked at this, many cities have already switched to no VIBA. So that's one thing about the proposal tonight, is to phase it off in 2 years. And we can always change that if something significant changes.
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So at the present time, most cities don't cover the VIBA. And the proposal on the table is not to cut VIBA totally, but to phase it out over 2 years. And if in a year we change our mind, we can. So I'm in favor of the tapered approach rather than the sudden cutting it off.
Any other comments? City Manager?
So the VIBA, yes, it is a contribution from the city to the employee's account. But what I like about the VIBA is it does, even though it's a city contribution to the employee's account, it is the employee, at least I guess I should speak for me, but the way I see it is it's my money, and so it has created that incentive for me to think twice before I go get that expensive MRI, or gives me that incentive to shop around, find out where the more less expensive MRI is before I withdraw money from my VIBA account. So that's what I like about this this shift in the way we're doing healthcare, is it is giving the person who's receiving the benefits, the insured, more of an incentive, more of a stake in what healthcare costs. And I don't think the city contributing to the VIBA diminishes that. I'm still very vigilant on how I'm spending my healthcare dollars, because I don't want to I don't want that VIBA account balance to go down. So that philosophical incentive or shift in incentive is still there. Also, I'm just looking over the city manager budget message, and I trust you all read it, even though I read a lot of it to you over the course of a council meeting. But you know, I really do believe in this concept of taking care of our employees. You know, Starbucks, CEO Howard Schultz said, "We built the Starbucks brand first with our people, not with our customers." And how he talked about how Starbucks led the way in offering health insurance benefits to its part-time employees. And Schultz knew that investing first in his employees would result in company loyalty as well as passion for the product and the service they provide. And that is proven out quite nicely with that company. And so too should we create an environment where our coworkers are highly valued and where we give each other the best internal customer service. So a key component of taking care of our internal customers is compensating them fairly and competitively. In this region and market, it's easy to lose good people to other cities and the private sector. And then I talk about the average household income here in the area going up rapidly, as well as the cost of living, and that we need to keep our coworkers whole and prevent them from losing financial ground. And so what happened with this change in benefits, just to remind you of the history, is AWC needed to get off of this more expensive plan that they had through 2017, and a lot of it had to do with the Affordable Health Care Act and the upcoming excise tax that was coming on more expensive plans by 2019. So AWC and all of its member cities said, hey, we don't want to pay that excise tax, so we need to go to a cheaper plan. And that cheaper plan meant more deductibles and more co-pays for employees. And so but what we said is, well, yeah, but we want to keep our employees whole. We don't want them to, we don't want their compensation, their total compensation, to go down because of this. So let's contribute to a VIBA so that the employees aren't as impacted by going to this cheaper plan. And so at the time, all the other cities that were on the AWC plan were in the same boat as us. And so they were having to be kicked off the more expensive AWC plan and come onto the less expensive plan in 2018. So we had no idea what the other cities were going to do. Were they going to start a VIBA? Were they going to contribute to a VIBA as well? We didn't know, but we did the math and we said, well, if we contribute at this level, we'll still save money compared to staying in that more expensive plan. So we are seeing albeit small, but a net savings by going to this cheaper plan and still contributing to a VIBA. So I'm recommending that we keep a VIBA contribution. At the same time, you hear me say, well, we got to do what the market says. I mean, I do that mantra for salaries. So I do recognize that now that we're a year into this, it does appear that our VIBA contribution is higher than other cities. But that said, I think our commitment was to keep employees whole and still save money, and we're doing both.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, if I, for any reason, believed we weren't compensating our employees well, I wouldn't support something like this. But I think we've consistently shown, whether it is through the studies or whatever we look at, or even when we have the job openings and we have significant people apply. And so, yeah, there's benefits from being with a public agency and benefits with being in the private sector, but it's a trade-off, and we're not seeing a mass exodus. And when there is an opening, we are seeing more than enough people in a tight economy that are applying. And then I guess lastly, and thank you for the city manager for touching on this, is that, we look at comparable cities to try to support a reason, and then so we can back up why we're doing what we're doing, and then now here we do this, and it's telling us not to do it, and it seems, I don't know, it seems like we get to just now pick and choose what studies we prefer and go with it. And I think it's unfair, and I think it's not being truthful with our citizens, taxpayers, when we're asking for them to pay more.
Any further discussion? All right, so just to clarify, the motion is to cut the VEBA contribution in half this next year in 2019, and then get rid of it completely in 2020. Is that correct, Clerk?
Yes.
Okay. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
No.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Fails.
Motion fails. What's the next decision point you need there, Joanne?
The next decision is on the high deductible health plan with health savings accounts. So for those employees, and there are only less than a handful, that choose to go on a high deductible plan, which we instituted in 2015, the city has offered a contribution to a similar but different account called a health savings account. This is a scenario where even by contributing to the health savings account for those employees, the city still saves money on the premiums. So I strongly encourage you to approve this because there's no net cost to the city. And we tried to incentivize people in the early years by offering a very attractive contribution, and then it was ramped down until 2018 to this level, and I recommend that we retain it at this level.
And how many employees are voluntarily participating in this high deductible plan?
In 2018, I believe there were 3.
So about 10%.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Councilor Smith? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Curtis.
Instead of discussion, can I make a motion?
Go for it.
I make a motion that we keep this high deductible plan at the same levels.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
The last healthcare item that I'd like to bring your attention to, now this is something that we're really excited about, and I think that we are really only one of 2 cities that are considering offering this new plan to our employees. So the AWC Trust developed these affordable health networks, and they're priced at a premium that's 5% lower than the traditional Health First that we are on now. What an employee has to do is choose a network to participate in, and then they would receive all of their care through that network. So by managing the care and collaborating within the network on the patient's care, they feel they can hold costs down and therefore premiums. So we would really like to offer this to our employees. As I said, there's a 5% premium across the board for anyone who chooses this type of plan. And I was hoping to incentivize people to do this. Some people may already be Evergreen patients and they get all their care at Evergreen or all their care at UW Medicine. But if we're saving 5%, could we consider sharing that savings with the employee in order to incentivize them to go onto this plan? And then the city would get a 2.5% savings, the employee would get the value of that into their HRA VEBA. That's my proposal.
Any questions, discussion? Councilmember Curtis.
I would just say, in general, this is the way healthcare is going, to more closed networks. You really can, by having integrated computer systems, you can keep track of things better, lab tests don't get repeated unnecessarily, x-rays can be viewed by everybody, so there really are savings that can be observed. And so I would say anything we can do to get on, be prepared for this, I think is good. So I'm definitely in favor of this.
Okay, anyone else? All right, well, seeing no objection, then I'm going to say that we just move forward with this as approved. Does anybody object? Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Should we go back to then the budget,
Yeah.
the other budget discussions and the tax levy?
Yes. The outstanding question then is what we want to take on the property tax. We've all had a chance to look over this. We've had a chance to talk it over the last month or so. Councilmember Curtis?
So thank you for the extra information, and some of it is very linear, as I would have predicted, but it was still nice to see that. When I look at, the budget that we started with, the cuts that we've made, but yet the big thing we didn't address very well this year was the road preservation. I would be in favor of the 3% tax increase, with the assumptions that you put together of a $600,000 house with a 12% increase, that's an extra $15 per year. I don't foresee in the next many years ever being this favorable to penalize people so little to benefit the city as much as it will. And if we take that extra 3% and we put it, some significant portion of it toward road maintenance, plus the savings that we found, we could be putting several $100,000 toward road preservation. So I would be leaning that direction.
Was that a motion, or were you just saying where you were philosophically?
For discussion.
Okay,
first.
no, I was just clarifying.
So at least to get the discussion started.
Councilmember Danuski?
So, Councilmember Curtis pretty much summed me up.
Can I offer a thought on that?
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking in the future about the community conversation we need to have with keeping our roads paved, because as we heard from a consultant, that it's a $2 million a year problem. And this gets us several $100,000 more, which is great. But what I don't want to happen is for us to have that community conversation 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and have the community say, hey, wait, you already raised our taxes for road preservation. What are you doing again? You're coming back again? So you see where I'm going with this? I don't want this to send the signal that we've solved the problem and that we still need to, this may help a little bit, but it only gets us partway there, and there's still a 1.5 million or more, there's still a long way to go on the road preservation. So I don't want citizens to go, wait, you just taxed me for that. Why are you asking for more? So I'm not recommending against your motion or what you want to do. We need to frame it properly.
Yeah, I mean, the motion to, we already voted last week to put any surplus into roads, so that's not really up for discussion. At least as far as I see it right
But
now.
he's talking about the extra couple percent putting it in.
Well, right, and that was already part of the discussion last week, though. That was already agreed to by the council, so. Councilmember
I
Curtis.
guess I was commenting in context of our whole budget discussion. We've worked hard to decrease expenses, and we are raising some taxes. So we are doing both with very good end goals in mind. So I meant it in a bigger context.
Anyone else? Okay. Chair will entertain a motion. Councilmember Curtis?
I'll make a motion that we increase the levy to 3% per year for the next 2 years.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilor Marshall?
So, question for Councilmember Curtis, you had proposed numbers be brought back for 2% though, last time, had you not?
No.
No.
That's for data on 2%.
Data on 2%, yes, okay.
You got it.
All right. So that's you're interested in or satisfied by that?
All right, I'm not seeing any more discussion, so will the clerk please take a roll on the motion?
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
May I ask a clarifying question? So regarding the funds to be directed to the street fund for maintenance, would it be this? I heard you say something about the extra 2%. I want to make sure I'm clear.
I believe we would need to look at what the actual motion was last week, but my understanding of the motion last week, and clerk might have to help us out with this, I believe what the motion was last week was that essentially any surplus, any funds over what we needed to fund the budget would go into street maintenance. Is that's
Okay.
my recollection.
That's what I remembered.
So-
and
so
that's
that would be all the
pretty
savings
much
plus
what
any-
is displayed here, but I wanted to make sure I understood that, and it wasn't necessarily the incremental 2%.
So my intent wasn't to have a certain amount. It's once we put everything in with our final decisions, what's in and what's out, a number will pop out.
It was
It
essentially
always
not to,
does.
it was essentially not to just add to our bank balances, but to put the money to use for immediately.
Once the general fund is
Right.
balanced. Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you very much. So I'll bring those ordinances to the council Monday, the 19th, for the levy and for the budget.
Thanks for your work.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
A lot of work.
We do this every year.
All right, next up, we're finally to the business agenda. We're going to receive and file September 2018 financial report for the city of Kenmore, Washington. Joanne Gregory.
Thank you. So this will be very brief, because I know that was a long discussion and presentation. But it's the last financial report to be presented to you before the end of the biennium, and it's also, the third quarter of 2018. So I wanted to just hit some high spots for you and give you a chance to ask any questions, because we'll be talking about budget amendments for this biennium soon. So as of September, though, the general fund was in a very positive financial position. Revenues exceeded expenditures. And there's also, of course, the expectation that the second half of the 2018 property taxes, which are due in October, will be apparent in the next monthly report. So that will bring the revenues up quite a bit. In fact, in October, we brought in $1.7 million of sales tax revenues. Of property tax revenues. Oh, I wish it was sales tax revenues. I'm sorry I said that. But sales tax is also continuing to exceed the budget expectations, although new construction revenues are not increasing at this point, and we're watching the tax reports to see if internet sales are going to have an impact. Expenditures are trending lower than the budget, although expenses for the Public Works shop will probably change that a bit between now and the end of the year. And when the proposed budget amendments are presented to you, you'll see that property and sales tax, as well as development revenues, are the bright spots in the budget, and then the potential expenses for the Public Works startup costs are the main expenditures to watch, and I will have recommendations to adjust those budgets accordingly. And the important thing is to also ensure that before we close the 2017-18 budget period, that none of our funds are in a negative position. So that brings up the bridge. Sammamish Bridge Fund is going to require a budget amendment. The engineer estimate of costs between now and the end of the year are a little bit higher than what the budget has, so we'll need to do a budget adjustment for that. Also, the fund is in a negative cash position because of the lag in grant reimbursements. This is going to continue to be a challenge for both engineering and finance throughout most of the life of the project, and same experience that we had in the 522 construction times when we were spending funds very quickly and the reimbursements always lagged behind. But the city has $26 million in cash investments at the moment. $8 million of that is the Prop 1 fund, so we feel that we are prepared for potential cash flow needs. The other fund of note is the REIT fund, which is maintaining a balance. It's far above the budget, but the monthly revenues are not as strong as they were in 2017. And because we depend so much on REIT for our capital projects, that we will need to watch that revenue source very closely. But there are no other items of note or concern to bring to your attention at this time. I apologize, it's such a short presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any
And
questions.
if I could just add a couple things.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the REIT's not as strong this year as it was last year, and projecting for the next biennium and beyond, we're conservatively projecting a drop, a noticeable drop in REIT, just to be on the safe side. Similarly, on sales tax, we're proposing or projecting a 5% drop in sales tax next year compared to year-end projections for this year.
Right, continuing to be conservative. And I thought it was interesting to hear how the median sales price on homes has dropped, you know, from the first half of the year to the second half of the year. So that affects the REIT too, both the value and the number of transactions.
Councilor Marshall?
And sales tax, I mean, expected to decline in general then, just based upon a cooling of the economy, for lack of better terms?
Yeah, we're thinking a recession is coming, and we're also we're also seeing what's in the construction pipeline, and construction sales tax is a portion of our overall sales tax, and we're projecting a drop in the construction portion of sales tax.
I will point out, though, and we should think about this when this starts to occur, is that my projections did not include anything for the lodge at St. Edward's. And those, as you know, could be significant. They are one-time revenues, and we might want to think about dedicating those to some purpose rather than just rolling them into operations, because it is a very significant project.
Did you include the building across the street that's going on?
The Flyway.
That was called? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Hearing no objection, I'm going to say that we have received and filed the September 2018 financial report for the city of Kenmore. Are there any objections? All right.
Thank you.
That brings us to item C, construction and trade as temporary use for 1 year at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way for an interim public workshop. Sorry to keep you guys sitting there so long.
We wouldn't want to be doing anything else tonight. But, hey, thank you again for the opportunity. This is regarding the public hearing that we had earlier on the temporary use public workshop. And so after what you've heard from us and heard from the public comment, do you have any questions for us before we ask that you approve the 1 year temporary use permit?
Councilor Marshall?
Was there any buffering or aesthetic construction around the edge, fences, I don't know, anything like that?
So Jennifer's going to come up, but I know that there is fencing and landscaping, but Jennifer can explain that a little bit more.
I thought for sure Samantha would know that.
So yes, there will be some fencing around. There's going to be some black vinyl coated chain link fence, and then we'll be landscaping the entire 522 frontage. We'll be closing off the driveway on 67 that's closest to 522, so that'll be enclosed. Then there's the one big tree, and then we'll have a 30-foot gate on the second driveway that's closest to Cooley.
Oh, there's still be an exit out onto 522?
What's that?
Will there still be an exit to 5?
No, there will not. That'll
Okay.
be completely fenced in, and we plan to also fence around the Espresso Works building once they're completely moved out. So the fencing will go the whole length of the 522 frontage, and then landscaping buffer between the fence and the back of sidewalk.
And the big tree will be protected.
Yes, we're not taking the tree down.
Can you explain the landscaping buffer? Is it, do you know the trees types and spacings? And
I did present that in the permit application, but off the top of my head, I don't know exactly, but it's going to be a combination of evergreen, deciduous trees, and shrubs. So what I had listed in here, thanks Sam for doing some emerald green cedars, Gary oak, red currant, viburnum spring bouquet, 9 bark, heavenly bamboo, star magnolia, and compact burning bush. It's kind of the mix.
Councilor Marshall?
And I apologize, was that to run along, the landscaping to run along 522 or not?
Yes.
Yes,
That
it
is
is.
basically all the landscaping will be on the 522 frontage. We don't plan on doing anything on the 67th.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Curtis?
I just had a general comment. I was really impressed with the amount of work you guys have done to actually do the pre-application meeting and go through all the steps as if anybody else would be doing this. And it looked, you know, you guys have analyzed it well, and I was pretty impressed with the work.
well, that's mainly, mostly Samantha's work, so.
Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any further discussion. So you are looking for a motion to approve a temporary use permit at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way. Do we have a motion to approve said temporary use permit?
I moved.
Second.
All right, moved in second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, as discussed earlier, we're going to skip over item D, discussing the Transfer and Development District. We'll turn to that later. That brings us to staff report.
Yeah, 2 items, Your Honor. I was pleased to hear that the county council passed their budget this afternoon, and I sent you guys an email about it, but just for public benefit, the county budget includes $200,000 to keep the Kenmore passenger-only ferry moving forward, I guess. So there was a feasibility study done a couple of years ago, and this $200,000 is to advance it forward and actually help create a plan to make it happen. Also, they had, and the budget includes $150,000 for affordable housing collaboration in the North Shore area, or the North King County area. I don't have a full description of what that means, but I'm sure that the North Shore cities could help the county put that money to good use. And then lastly, the budget also includes $8 million in bonding capacity for affordable housing in North King County, specifically for North King County. So that was good news from Councilmember Dembowski. We appreciate his efforts. He works really hard for our city, and we appreciate that. And then lastly, I think it was Councilmember Marshall that expressed a desire to have full translation next time we talk about the mobile home parks. And so next week, we're going to have some comp plan amendments to bring forward for you. One of those is based on the policy direction you gave us for mobile home parks. And so to do full translation, we looked at a variety of ways, including having headsets and one person talking while the conversation was, one person translating while the conversation was going. And that from what we could tell, that was going to be extremely difficult. So to do full translation for that item, we would recommend that we just do sentence for sentence translation. So, good evening, Mayor and Council, buenas noches, Mayor and Council, and that kind of one-for-one translation. It'll double the length of the conversation. The conversation's probably going to be a 10, 15-minute conversation, so it'll probably be a 20 or 30-minute conversation with full translation. A couple of you asked, well, were people dissatisfied with the level of translation that's been provided so far? And it's been mixed. We've heard some people say it's been fine, but we heard others say, no, we actually didn't know what the council was saying, and so it was hard for us to follow it. And then the other thing we've done is in at least two locations, we have put a sentence on the agenda item that says, if you need translation services, contact the city by this coming Thursday. So we've done that on the actual agenda item. We also have it on the website that explains what's going on. And then the person who was the spokesperson for the Hispanic community, she's reached out to the folks she's been in contact with and also told them to request translation services by this Thursday. So if we get 0 requests for translation services, one option might be to just not provide it or provide it at the same level we have in the past. I would like your direction on it, though.
Does anybody have thoughts on this? Councilmember Curtis?
Yes, indeed. I understand the importance of communication with our citizens. I'm honestly having a struggle with this one. I work a lot in my new endeavor with the Hispanic population, and a lot of them understand, even though they don't speak really good English. But if you slow down, you can usually make yourself understood. You can communicate. My only experience with full translation actually was in Korea. So I went to Yonggi Cho's church, and they had 12 different translators in 12 different languages, and you could choose Chinese or English or Japanese, and you got the headphones, and you got the whole thing as it was happening. It seems like a lot of work to provide that level of translation services, and why would we only choose Hispanic? There's a fairly significant Russian population or Ukrainian in the area. Why wouldn't we do it for them? So I'm really struggling with the whole concept of why only for certain subjects and certain languages would we do this and not for others. So I'm not sure I have an answer, but it just feels like I don't have a good resolution in my own mind.
Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, I think the importance is that we know that we have a significant Latino population in the parks to be affected, and we want to provide them the service and let them know what's going on in the interest of transparency and fairness, the same as anybody else. So we know we need to make things clear and or transparent for everybody. Also, I'm used to not only, I think, in the courts in my work, having just simultaneous translation be a very commonplace phenomenon when people are going up and talking to a judge. It's just simultaneous, and the court translates back and forth. It doesn't seem that big an issue. I see it with the city of Seattle. I see it with the Seattle Public Schools. I see it with a lot of local governments that are doing that. So it seems a matter of equity to me.
Councilmember Danuski?
I think for at least this upcoming meeting, it's not a very controversial subject. There's not a lot of decision-making I don't think that we're really going to get into. So I think I'm good for if people don't ask for translation by Thursday, that we just don't have it at this one, but I'm open to either.
Sure.
The notice, the request for the translation services, that was in English though, right? Not in Spanish?
So on the agenda itself, it's English, but Lori Anderson, I haven't checked for myself, but Lori Anderson tells me that on our city's website that has the information translated into Spanish, my assumption would be that that request is in Spanish, but I haven't checked it. I guess I could go on and try to find it right now, but.
I mean, for my own personal view, I think offering translation services in general is not a bad practice for a government agency. But I think putting I don't want to call it barrier, but just asking people if they want it, a few days ahead of time isn't that big of a barrier. And I would even open that up to other things. If there's subjects that are coming up and somebody speaks Russian and that's all they speak and they really want to have input in something we're doing, I don't have any objection to us having a larger discussion about just offering some of these, if people let us know, 4 working days ahead, or whatever it is, Thursday or Friday beforehand, in time to get somebody here. I think offering people till Thursday is perfectly reasonable, especially because we've done additional outreach to the community. So I'm comfortable with where staff is currently.
Okay, and so if we do get requests for translation by Thursday, are you comfortable with what we've been doing up till now, or would you like the full translation?
I would certainly like the full translation for the reasons stated. I think it's more thorough, and just to translate one way doesn't work.
Councilmember Danuski?
It would also be, if you wanted to ask the person who needed the translation what level they need, that would be acceptable as well, in my opinion.
Councilmember
Hear that
Curtis?
comment?
Oh, that if somebody requests translation, you can have a conversation with them on what level of translation they need as well.
Councilmember Smith was that a hand? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. That's it.
All right. Council comments and reports, initiatives. Councilmember Smith.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Thanks for following up on that to the city manager on the question of translation and everything. And now a very prominent local business I noticed is celebrating its anniversary this year, and that's Kenmore 50 Lanes. But I can't remember precisely whether it's 60 or 65. I think it is 60. It was just there yesterday to celebrate one of our many celebrations. As a council, Williams can attest, it is 60.
We should celebrate that somehow. I mean, that's a big deal. It's not a small thing. Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing to add.
All right. I'm going to keep this short, but I did spend Wednesday through Saturday night at the National League of Cities Conference in Los Angeles. A good time was had, other than the smoke that was coming into the city from the surrounding fires, which caught me off guard, and which is why I'm a little froggy still. My asthma and allergies don't really take kindly to a bunch of wood smoke. But all of that said, the one thing that really jumped out to me, and I know that city manager's been hearing about this a little bit, and we've discussed this as a council a little bit, but cities in general, our role in helping the census be successful is kind of an integral one. We are trusted more than the government. You and I, as elected officials, are trusted more than the administration when you're talking to folks on the street. We have a role that we can play with communication, with outreach, and with kind of making sure that everybody in Kenmore is properly counted in the 2020 census. Through our communications outreach, through working with partners, through setting up something that they call a complete count committee. We could work with the school district. Local schools have great communications with parents, things like that. So I'm going to be tossing that up probably as a retreat discussion piece, because I think it's very important for us that we have a correct count in Kenmore when it comes to funding and all sorts of things. And I think that with fairly minimal city resources, we can have a positive impact in that. So that was my takeaway from that. Other than that, it was Elon Musk and Maria Shriver talking, and a few other classes that were great. But
Your Honor,
anyway.
if I could just add to you.
Of course.
So in the 2010 census, we looked at reporting rates of the different census blocks. And there were two, at least two, census blocks here in Kenmore, right around here, right around this neighborhood here, that were noticeably undercounted, or they were under-responding compared to other census blocks. So that was a big red flag for me.
Yeah, I was taking a look at the maps, and overall, all of our precincts, I think, were above 85% in the initial sweep. But yeah, there were a couple that were lower than the rest of the city, so we can do better, and I think we can play a role in that. Anyway, if nothing else is going to come before the council, we are adjourned. All right. It's okay.